Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory tells us of a little snuff film Roald Dahl secretly created but without telling anyone. Obviously, we've all heard of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, but what Roald Dahl does not want you to know is that there's a secret snuff film of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. And it's rumoured that if you find this snuff film video, it's cursed, and Willy Wonka, will come for you and kill you. The name of the cursed lost footage was named Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Basically, if you supposedly watch this Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, the film will go on like normal, up until the very end, where you see Willy Wonka get killed by some unknown entity that looks similar to him. He gets raped and then murdered, murdered by being drowned in the chocolate river. Then Willy Wonka wanks over his dead corpse and comes all over it, hence the name Willy Wonka probably. Then he goes to Charlie and he rapes and murders him as well in the same fashion, wanks over his dead corpse, sometimes even has sex with him a bit. Willy Wonka is known as like a paedophile and a necrophilic in this snuff film, Cursed Lost Tape. The thing is, after that, the screen just cuts to black, and people thought that was the end of it. But 3 minutes later, we see the video slowly emerge, and then you see all of the corpses of every single character from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory with cum all over them, and Willy Wonka just sat there wanking you and looking at the screen like this. It zooms in on his face, and then it ends. The rumour is that this very snuff film is cursed, and if you happen to watch it, he will come to you and kill you, rape you, in the same fashion that it's done in the movie. He would drown you and then wank over your dead corpse and leave you hanging like the rest of them. And then, whoever else watches the video, you'll realise that they'll be able to see your corpse added to the collection in the movie. So, pretty scary. They say, if you find this footage, which is very rare as is likely nowhere to be seen anymore, that you destroy that footage and you never ever watch Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, because you may become his next victim. And that would even explain the scene where you may see unknown corpses. Those were his previous victims. In fact, those actors and actresses were all dead. They actually were actual victims of that Willy Wonka. The director even supposedly died shortly after. You may even see Roald Dahl's corpse himself up there, being Willy wanked off. He just took over the book and the movie. So, that's supposedly what happens if you find this snuff footage. Whether it is real or not, no one knows. But will you be his next victim? The story behind Willy Wonka himself goes back really far. Supposedly, he basically cursed anyone who basically doesn't like him or whatever. He basically owned a similar factory to Willy Wonka, but Willy Wonka won and he got really pissed off that his factory was less popular. So he just went in there at the end of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory and killed Willy Wonka. Then you see his corpse along with Roald Dahl's and Charlie's and all the other characters' corpses and even unknown corpses of his victims just hanging there covered in gum. The Leecher is a paranormal entity that has been having legends for over 40 years, that goes around and leeches off your Wi-Fi and internet. The scary thing about this entity is that it's not that the fact that it leeches off your Wi-Fi and internet, but if you happen to spot the Leecher leeching off of your Wi-Fi, it will charge at you and kill you. The Leecher, most of the time, is invisible, but as I already said, if you happen to catch it according to the legend, it will charge at you and kill you. So, normally the signs that a Leecher is in your house is normally when your Wi-Fi or internet is extremely slow. If you happen to notice this, don't go looking for the Leecher, because if you spot it, even for just a second, it's already too late. It will charge at you and kill you. No one knows how it kills you, but there's been a load of unreported, unrelated loads of weird deaths and dead bodies being found in certain places that have been fried and electrocuted very badly, and the Leecher is likely the reason that those people were found dead in their homes. Is because they went looking for the Leecher. There are supposed people who have even survived the Leecher's attack or Leecher's attacks before, and here are a few of their stories. A woman from 2003 once claimed that she spotted a Leecher leeching off of her little cable TV. The Leecher turned around and looked at her, and she described it as a very tall, skinny, black, orb-like figure with white eyes that glared right back at her. It looked kind of like a leech, its mouth, and it had teeth in a very circular motion. It made an ear-piercing screech and then darted off. The reason the Leecher didn't attack her? No one knows. But she is extremely lucky that she survived a Leecher attack. His second story is from 1996, and it's about a 24-year-old guy who is drinking Coke or whatever and playing video games when he claimed he saw some kind of creature-like orb thing in the corner of his eye. He turned to look at it, but when he looked there was nothing there. This was later proven to be the Leecher. He survived, thankfully, but he was lucky to be alive just like the woman. As normally, even if you catch a glimpse of the Leecher, it's already too late. It's already getting ready to charge at you and kill you. Normally, it kills you by stabbing you to death or electrocuting you to death. Hence those fried, burned, stabbed and electrocuted bodies. The Leecher as a legend is very, very unknown. The entity is also very, very unknown. The odds of him appearing in your house is very, very unknown. Even if it is a him, it's more than it. But if you happen to spot him, or it's already too late. You will be its next victim. So if you ever notice that your Wi-Fi is super slow, just close your eyes or something like that, because you may become its next victim. The story of the Leecher dates back to 40 years ago, but people were talking about this thing as a nasty creature to hate that was ruining their internet speed. They had to basically have someone to hate, so they came up with the Leecher story, and people went over there and started hating this particular creature. There's even supposed groups, even today, going out hunting the leecher. But believe me, you do not want to join that hunting group, because they may never be seen again, as they'll be its next victim. So, will you be his next victim? Water Guy is an unknown being which is rumoured to have existed for millions of years, and he is supposedly responsible for loads of disappearances and deaths. He is commonly associated with water, hence the name for Water Guy. What Water Guy will do is if he chooses you as his next victim, he will come to you and take you to an unknown world. There he will vaporize you to death, and you'll be just water vapor, and you will be his next victim. In fact, he is for one responsible for all the disappearances and deaths at the Bermuda Triangle. Even the Yeti, the Kraken and the Loch Ness Monster are just him covering his tracks. Well, technically it's not even him, but it's more of an unknown being. What makes Water Guy scary is that he's been doing this for millions of years. Even ancient creatures from the past, like millions of years ago, have been disappearing because of him, or because of Water Guy. Water Guy is likely the explanation for every disappearance ever on the world. Maybe even in the universe. We just don't know. Water Guy is commonly spotted in water or near water, but if he chooses you as his next victim, he'll go to land as well. Doesn't matter how far from water it is. So, if you're gonna go swimming one night, you might want to be careful, as that increases your chances of being his next victim. There are even people who have claimed to have survived Water Guy before, and here are some of their stories. The first story comes from a 33-year-old man in 1991. He was going to the beach one day for a swim when he claimed that in the distance he saw what seemed to be a blue figure with black eyes. Upon closer inspection, he realised that the black eyes were staring right back at him. It then ran off, never to be seen again. He was lucky that he was not chosen to be his next victim. The second story comes from a 43-year-old woman in 1973. She was swimming at the pool one day, when at the deep end of the pool, she claimed she saw some kind of being, but she could not describe it properly. So she swam to the deep end to see what it was, but when she got there was nothing there. This was later proven to be Water Guy. And just like the man, she was lucky to have not been chosen to be its next victim. So when you go swimming, remember to be careful, because you may become his next victim. So, will you be his next victim? Henry Senorita is a mythical being that has existed for around a couple hundred years and was born in Mexico. Henry Senorita is a cross between a hillbilly cowboy redneck and a Mexican. Henry Senorita is feared across the world because if you go and torment or try and kill a Mexican, one of the last words you may hear them say before you kill them is Henry Senorita. If you hear one say this, you've got to run away, because in a few minutes, if you don't, Henry Senorita will arrive and kill you if you haven't ran away. Being a cross between a cowboy hillbilly redneck and a Mexican, he likely will shoot you with his trusty pistol, shotgun, or AK-47. He has sworn an oath to protect every Mexican person out there. Hence why if you hear a Mexican person yell, Henry Senorita, before they die or before you kill them, it's because they are calling for him. The reason he is still alive today, despite being a couple hundred years old, being born in the 1800s, is because he is a mythical being. In fact, even Donald Trump, the reason he's building the wall, or trying to build a wall between America and Mexico, is because of Henry Senorita getting into the United States and killing people. But Trump does not want you to know that. Any kills Henry Senorita makes will be swept under the rug, because no one wants to have to deal with this mythical being. They just want to block him off so he can't kill any more non-Mexican people in other countries. Only Mexican people know what he looks like, because any non-Mexican person who's ever seen him has never made it out alive. If you see Henry Senorita, it's already too late, unless if you're a Mexican. There are even cases where Henry Senorita will come after you whether you ran away or not, so it's best not to harm, torment or kill a Mexican, or do anything to them that might make them want to say the phrase Henry Senorita, because that is their calling card, and if they say that, your life is in great danger, and it may already be too late to run away. There are even cases of people who have claimed to have survived Henry Senorita before, and here are some of their stories. The first case is from a 23-year-old man in 1969. He was on holiday in Mexico one day when he claimed he saw some kind of mythical being. It looked like a cowboy hillbilly redneck and a Mexican mixed together. The look of him gave him such chills that he cancelled the holiday straight away and went back to the United States, and he knew he had to have some kind of protection against this being, and he needed to build a wall between the border of Mexico and America. It is rumoured that he is still trying to build this wall today, 48 years later, to protect America against this mythical being. The second story comes from a 23-year-old woman in 1971. She claimed she was in a swimming pool in Mexico one day during spring break there, where she claimed she saw some kind of mythical being in the distance, as if it was protecting something. She noticed he was carrying a shotgun on his back, and when she saw this, she was so frightened that she ran out of that pool, then went back to the United States, never to enter Mexico again. How these two people survived is unknown, but what is known is that whatever you do, this being is pretty easy to avoid. All you need to do is not to torment, harm or kill a Mexican, or make them say the phrase Henry Senorita. Anyone can say the phrase, but he will only come if it's a Mexican saying it. So you don't have to worry about saying the phrase unless if you're a Mexican. But if you're a Mexican, he will not kill you. You only have to worry if you're a non-Mexican and you hear a Mexican say the phrase. But overall, you shouldn't have to worry about this being as much as the Leecher, Water Guy, and Willy Wonka. The fence manager of 68 is an interesting being born in England in 1868. He died in 1968 at the age of 100, but the rumour is that his spirit still goes around today, haunting people. The fence manager of 68 is feared across the globe because he haunts people all over the world, no matter where you are. And he commonly haunts people who, when they hear a joke, they take offence. Because when they take offence or get offended, spiritually, you're taking one of his offences, and that makes him extremely angry. And most of the time, his hauntings are extremely lethal. The reason his hauntings are normally lethal is because he carries around his trusty pistol, which is a blunderbuss type of pistol. And normally when he's angry, he will shoot you with that. He did this while he was alive, but his spirit can still do the same thing. What makes the fence manager of 68 scary is that he was a normal human being who just got really angry when people took his fences, when they got offended by jokes. Spiritually and physically, they would literally take one of his fences out of anger when they get offended by whenever someone did an offensive joke. He would then go to those people and kill them by shooting them with his blunderbuss like a pistol. The thing about the fence manager of 68 is, he hasn't got the common British traits that you would expect to see in a normal British person. He's more of a cowboy, hillbilly redneck type of human being, rather than an English human being, despite being born in England. No one really knows what he looks like, because most of the time you'll only see him if someone's took one of his offences because someone took offence to a joke. And normally people who do see him never make it out alive. But despite that, there are people who have claimed to have survived the fence manager of 68 before, and here are some of their stories. The first story comes from a 24-year-old man in 1991. He was on his farm one day in England when in the distance he claimed he saw some kind of angry cowboy hillbilly type of person with a gun in his pocket. Upon closer inspection he realised it was a blunderbuss type gun, and upon seeing this he realised it was the fence manager of 68, and his presence made him so scared that he ran straight back to his farm and locked all the doors. It turns out he got offended by a joke 3 days earlier, and he spiritually took one of his fences, and he was super angry and was coming for him. But luckily he lost interest and never decided to shoot that man dead. The second story comes from a 19-year-old woman in 2006. She was on holiday in Paris one day when in the distance on top of the Eiffel Tower she claimed she saw some kind of angry cowboy person. Immediately she knew who it was, and she ran so far, and she was so scared that she ran and got a plane and came back to England, never to return to Paris again. It turned out that she was a feminist who got offended by a kind of male joke about 1 day ago, and the fence manager of 68 was coming back for his fence because she spiritually took one of his fences. But the fence manager of 68 later lost interest, and she is lucky that the fence manager of 68 decided not to shoot her dead. Overall, the fence manager of 68 is quite an easy human being to avoid. All you need to do is to not get offended by a joke, and if you do not state that you're offended, as that increases your chances of spiritually taking one of his fences, and he will come back for his fence, and he will kill you. As he's a spirit now, the police will not be able to do anything on your murder from him. And even before, he was considered too powerful of a being to defeat. So, whatever you do, do not fuck with the fence manager of 68. Do not piss off the fence manager of 68. And do not spiritually take one of his fences, as he will come to you and fucking kill you. The viral video is a video that is rumoured to be cursed, and if you happen to watch it, it will drive you to insanity and suicide. There was a case of someone who've claimed they'd seen the viral video on YouTube before, and when he first clicked the link, he realised the video had no comments, likes, or even dislikes. When he played the video, the screen was black for the first 20 seconds. Then, a man materialises onto the camera, and he starts chanting something that seems like, "Never stop alone," is all he could make out. And the song in the background apparently was a slowed down, scarier version of Harry Belafonte, Shake Sonora. The man then takes a gun and commits suicide by shooting himself in the head with it. The video then goes on for another minute or so with that song playing in the background. The room is still dark. Then he just turned off the video and he looked for the viral video, but he found nothing until he eventually found a forum. And in the forum, someone claimed that the video was cursed because the song would get stuck in your head, and then the face would get stuck in your head that was in the video, and then you can't sleep and you would commit suicide. He believed it was not real, but he did wish he never saw the video because the song was now stuck in his head. Whether this man is still alive or not is unknown. Many other people have tried to find the viral video, but have never found it. That was up until recently, where I found the video in tape form in an abandoned field. Upon watching the video, I realised it matched the description of this man's story, so I decided to upload it to YouTube. About 6-7 months later, it was removed from YouTube because it was rumoured that a lot of people committed suicide after watching that video. About a few weeks after the video was removed, I went back to the original abandoned field where I found the tape, and I realised I found another tape there, and it had the same name. Upon watching the video, it was very similar to the original video, and I decided to put that new video up onto YouTube. That video is still on YouTube today, and no one knows if anyone's committed suicide after watching that video or not. All that remains of the first viral video is this still image. The newer viral video is a lot more demonic and scary than the original viral video. It is rumoured that the effects are a lot worse in the newer viral video than in the original. That is because it's rumoured that a demon or even Satan himself is the character in the newer viral video, unlike the original where it was just a man who committed suicide. This demon or even Satan himself has possessed the original man's body and is now chanting demonic things, and not only will it may make you commit suicide and drive you to insanity, it may send your soul straight to hell. Some people who have seen the video still claim it's the same man,
that was in the original Revolve video, except he's now more red and hellish. This is probably because Satan has morphed into the man's soul. Whether the Revolve video is cursed or not, the original or the newer, no one knows. But be careful before watching the video, as you may become its next victim.
Mr. Head is a terrifying, dangerous, and unknown entity that has existed for around 420 billion years. Mr. Head is feared across the globe because he can be anywhere across the entire universe, but his favourite place is planet Earth. And he chooses his victims randomly, no matter the age, gender or race. And you can't even prevent his attacks. And there's no way to stop him from attacking you. If he chooses you as his next victim, then you will be his next victim. What makes Mr. Head terrifying is that if he happens to catch you, he will torture and kill you. If you happen to be a man, he will literally give you head for between 2 to 4 hours. And if you're a woman, he will simply just kill you by chomping your head off. Mr. Head is described as a bold-like, scary entity creature in its normal form, but it can take form of any living thing, including an attractive woman, to attract men to him so he can torture and kill them. The reason Mr. Head gives you head for between 2 to 4 hours is that that's how long it roughly takes before your twanger will fall off due to his head being so excruciatingly painful. When it falls off, he would swallow it whole and you would simply die. He would then eat your rotten corpse whole. And as I already said, if you're a woman, he would just eat you whole. Mr. Head is so powerful that no one has ever been able to defeat him. In fact, the only way you can protect yourself from him is to learn for the cues to see when he's nearby. If you ever hear the weird old groaning noise, or a person that's uglier than the ugliest person you've ever seen, that's very commonly, likely, him. Despite him being so dangerous, there are people who have claimed to have survived Mr. Head before, and here are some of their stories. The first story comes from a 22-year-old man in 1999. He was at work one day when he claimed he saw some kind of ugly entity creature-like thing. It was so ugly that he had to look away. It was even uglier than the previous ugliest thing he ever seen. And then, without warning, the entity pounced on him and proceeded to give him head. He managed to get away after receiving it for 15 minutes. It was so excruciating that he later committed suicide 4 years later. As has been proven that Mr. Head's experience is so traumatizing that it may just lead you to suicide, or you simply die from its ugliness haunting your mind and making you explode at night. The second story comes from a 15-year-old girl in 2017. She was in her classroom one day when she claimed that in the right corner of her classroom there was some kind of scary entity-like creature that was so ugly that she was provoked to look away. The creature then pounced on her and tried to bite her head off, but only gave her a small cut. She managed to get away, but unfortunately she's suffering so much now that she's been considering suicide, and it's rumoured that she is expected to explode in just a few days from now, and that will likely hit the news. Unlike a lot of stories, these people didn't survive. Mr. Head is just simply too terrifying and powerful to defeat. Unlike the other beings, you can avoid them, it's just best not to provoke them. With Mr. Head, You simply just can't get away. He is simply the most powerful and terrifying entity ever. So be careful, because if you ever spot someone who's uglier than the ugliest thing you've ever seen one day, just be careful, as you may become his next victim. The Dealer is a scary being born in Colombia in 1943. What the Dealer does is quite self-explanatory. He basically goes around dealing lots of drugs, but he occasionally deals some other illegal items. But he is not your ordinary dealer. He is a lot more powerful than your ordinary dealer, and even more powerful than the most biggest drug lords in the world. And any drug lord or dealer who's tried to overtake him has been killed by the Dealer. If a normal person, including you, happens to spot the Dealer dealing drugs or other illegal items, he will kill you, especially if you're the police and you happen to spot him. He will normally kill you with his trusty submachine gun, but he's been known to kill people with any kind of gun that he happens to have at the time. He does wear a cowboy-like hat and is quite brown-skinned all over, being born from Colombia. He looks like an average Colombian drug lord, but he's a little bit bigger and a lot more powerful than any other drug lord. No one dares stop the Dealer from dealing his illegal items and drugs. Even Donald Trump, all he wants to do is just build the wall between America and Mexico, so the Dealer can't charge through Colombia into Mexico and then into the United States and deal the illegal drugs. If you spot the Dealer doing normal things, he will not kill you. He will only kill you if you spot him dealing drugs or other illegal items, or if you try and stop him from doing the illegal things. It is just best to not mess with the Dealer in any way. It is best to just leave him alone to do the illegal things. And even Trump's wall might end up being broken down by the Dealer if he ends up building it. Despite the Dealer being more powerful than your average drug lord or dealer, there are people who have claimed to have survived the Dealer before. And here are some of their stories. The first story comes from a 31-year-old man in the year 1961. He was on holiday in Mexico one day, when in the distance he claimed he saw some kind of brown figure with a weird hat on. Upon closer inspection, he realized it was the Dealer. The Dealer then started trying to attack him, but the man managed to get away, and he was lucky that the Dealer did not kill him. The second story comes from a 28-year-old woman in the year 1986. She was shopping in the United States one day, when in the right corner of the store she claimed she saw some kind of brown being with a weird hat on. When she got a closer look, she was so frightened by its looks that she ran away. This later turned out to be the Dealer, and just like the man, she's lucky that she didn't get killed by the Dealer. Overall, compared to the others, the Dealer is a very easy being to avoid. All you have to do is to not provoke him or try to stop him from what he's doing. Saladjuta is a curse that is rumoured to have existed for a few thousand years, and it goes that if you stand in front of a mirror and say the phrase Saladjuta 7 times in a row, a scary Lithuanian entity will come out of the mirror and kill you. The reason the Lithuanian entity will kill you is that it's very angry at you at the moment, because you not only pronounced his name wrong, you're also technically calling him a girl according to Lithuanian terms, and this entity has been proven to be a he. What the real name of the entity is unknown, as not many people even know what the country of Lithuania is, so people are too afraid to ask a Lithuanian how to pronounce the entity correctly. Salajuta is very similar to Bloody Mary, but Salajuta is a lot more terrifying than Bloody Mary. Despite Salajuta being so powerful and scary, there are people who have claimed to have survived Salajuta before, and here are some of their stories. The first story comes from a 37-year-old man in 1997. He was on holiday in Lithuania one day, when in his hotel bathroom he decided to play Salajuta. But when he succeeded in the ritual, he saw some kind of very dangerous and scary Lithuanian entity. When he saw this, he ran out the bathroom as fast as he can, and he was lucky that he wasn't killed by the Lithuanian entity. The second story comes from a 26-year-old woman in 1987. She was on holiday in Latvia one day when, in her cheap motel bathroom, she decided to do Salajuta. And when she succeeded in the ritual, she was so frightened by the Lithuanian entity that she ran out of that motel and flew back to the United Kingdom, never to return to Latvia again. And just like the man, she's lucky she survived Salajuta. Overall, Salajuta is a very easy entity to avoid. All you need to do is to not do the cursed ritual. But do you dare do the cursed ritual? But be careful if you do so, as you may become his next victim. The Buddha is a terrifying being that has existed for around 469 billion years. The Buddha controls every single action and thing in the universe, and even supposedly created the universe itself, and even possibly previous universes before our own. The Buddha can choose to boot anyone or anything from its server. If the Buddha decides to boot you from its server, you will die. The Buddha resembles a brownish boot with the shadow of half a shin. The Buddha is feared across the globe. That is because he chooses his victims randomly, so randomly in fact, that you one day may suddenly become his next victim. The universe and bits around it is the server for the Buddha, and if the Buddha decides to boot you from its server, it would literally kick you in the butt with its brownish boot with half a shadow for a shin, and you will explode billions and billions and billions of light years away from the universe, and you'll vaporize to death if the booting itself didn't kill you already. Despite the Buddha being so terrifying and powerful of a being, there are people who have claimed to have survived the Buddha before, and here are some of their stories. The first story comes from a 31-year-old man in 1969. He was in Portugal one day when in the distance he claimed he saw some kind of brownish boot with a shinish-like shadow. When he saw this, he was so frightened by what it looked like that he ran away as fast as he could. And the man was lucky that he didn't get booted from the server. The second story comes from a 21-year-old woman in 1978. She was in Spain one day when in the distance she claimed she saw some kind of weird boot with a weirdish shadow-like figure. When she saw this figure, she was so frightened by the being that she ran away so fast that she got away within seconds. And just like the man, she was lucky that she didn't get booted from the server. Overall, the booter is actually fairly easy to avoid because he very rarely actually boots you from its server, hence why those two people survived. But be careful, as you may one day be booted by the booter. Mr. Burnt is a Chinese being born in ancient China in 640 BC. He died in 603 BC in ancient Japan at the age of 37 by being burnt to death for being too Chinese. It is said that his spirit still roams China and Japan to this day, and he resembles a burnt Chinese figure, and if you happen to spot him, you will die, as he will come to you and kill you by burning you to death in the exact same way that he was burnt to death all those years ago. What makes Mr. Burnt scary is that you only need to catch a glimpse of him and it's already too late. He will haunt your nightmares, and there's even cases of people randomly catching in flames in their homes and dying that way. But if he spots you, he will charge at you and burn you to death with his super hot eyes. He doesn't physically or spiritually haunt your nightmares. He's so scary of a being that the looks of him is enough to give you nightmares and possibly lead you to suicide, and even catching in flames and burning to death into ash at night. Despite Mr. Burnt being so scary of a being, there are people who have claimed to have survived Mr. Burnt before, and here are some of their stories. The first story comes from a 29-year-old man in 1999. He was in China one day doing some Chinese things when, in the distance on top of the Great Wall of China, he claimed he saw some kind of burnt being. The looks of this being frightened him so much that he ran back to his house, never to return to the Great Wall of China again, and it is rumoured that he's having nightmares about this being right now. The second story comes from a 27-year-old woman in 1996. She was in Japan one day when, in the distance, she claimed she saw some kind of burnt figure. When she saw this, it frightened her so much that she ran out so far that she took the plane and went back to China, never to return to Japan again. It is rumoured that she is also having nightmares about this burnt being today. Overall, Mr. Burnt is a very hard being to avoid. You just better hope he doesn't spot you or choose you as his next victim. Figure World is a video that is rumoured to be cursed, and if you happen to watch it, a mysterious figure will take you to an unknown world, which is rumoured to be called Figure World, because there's so many figures there. In the world, he will do some eerie things to you. The eerie things he does is unknown, but it is rumoured that it ends with insanity and death. The insanity is rumoured to be caused by the loads of figures that are just there watching you in this dark, unknown world. The eerie things
that is rumoured to be done to you is that he will vaporize you into some black dust, where you'll eventually morph into a figure to be forever trapped in Figure World. What the world looks like is unknown, but it's just rumoured by lots of people to look dark and hellish. The cursed video itself is actually very short, less than 1 minute long, but that's all it takes for that figure in the video at the very end to realise that you've watched it, and he'll come after you and take you to that world and do those eerie things to you. Most of the cursed video is just darkness, but at some points you can see some eerie lights, and at one point in the video you can see some kind of circular structure which is rumoured to be the portal to Figure World, where he does those eerie things to you. For a long time the video remained lost. That was until I found the video in an abandoned field. I decided to upload the video to YouTube. The facts of the video are still very unknown, and the eerie things he supposedly does to you are still very unknown. The vaporizing black theory is just a theory. But before you watch the cursed video, be careful, as you may become its next victim. Girthman is a scary being that is rumoured to have existed for billions of years. Girthman is feared across the globe, and even feared across the universe. That is because he has a very unknown supernatural power which is known as his girth. This power is so powerful that if he decides to use it on you or near you, you will die. Girthman resembles a 40-foot tall, muscular man with a blue hat, a blue suit, and a blue girth stick. This girth stick, which he uses his hands to power, is where his girth comes from. But his girth also comes from the rest of his body, so be careful. What makes Girthman scary is that he sometimes randomly chooses victims to kill off with its girth, and if he decides to kill you off with its girth, it will be a terrible process before you die from its girth, and he doesn't even need to do anything, as his girth alone is enough to kill you off. And if you spot him, it increases your chances of being his next victim, and if he chooses you as his next victim, then you will be his next victim. Despite Girthman being so powerful and deadly with his girth, there are people who have claimed to have survived Girthman before, and here are some of their stories. The first story comes from a 33-year-old man in 1976. He was on holiday in Canada one day when, in the distance, he claimed he saw some kind of girthy being. When he saw this girthy being, he was so frightened by its girthy looks and its girth that he ran away, so far that he went all the way back to the United States, never to return to Canada again. The second story comes from a 17-year-old woman in 2007. She was on holiday in Australia one day when, in the distance in the Australian outback, she claimed she saw some kind of weird being in a suit. When she got a closer look, she realised it was Girthman, and his girth was having such a powerful effect on her in a negative way she ran away from Girthman, and she ran so far that she took the plane and went back to the United Kingdom, never to return to Australia again. Overall, Girthman is a relatively easy being to avoid, but it's still a very scary being. You just need to make sure that you don't get too close to him or let his girth affect you. Money Guy is a terrifying being that is rumoured to have existed for a few million years. Money Guy has got all the money in the world and even in the universe, and he controls every single aspect of every single human life and all other forms of intelligent lives on Earth and in the universe. Money Guy controls the poor and the rich and how much money they get. They're all essentially his puppet. What makes Money Guy scary is that he'll give certain people offers, especially politicians and rich people, in return for lots of money, and if they refuse to complete those offers, he'll leave them to die by starving to death, because he will never give them any money, so they'll never get any money. Money Guy decides who is rich and who is poor, and if he chooses you as his next victim, you will eventually starve to death because he'll never give you any money. Money Guy chooses his victims randomly, and that's why certain people become randomly rich or randomly poor. And if he chooses you as his next victim, you will die by starving to death because you don't have enough money. Despite Money Guy being such a terrifying of a being, there are people who have claimed to have survived Money Guy before, and here are some of their stories. The first story comes from a 21-year-old man in 1993. He was on holiday in Africa one day, when in the distance he claimed he saw a terrifying rich being. And when he saw this terrifying rich being, he ran so far and so fast that he never returned to Africa again. The second story comes from a 29-year-old woman in 1989. She was on holiday in South America one day when she claimed in the distance that she saw a terrifying being. When she saw this being, she was so scared that she ran so far and so fast that she never returned to South America again. These two people were very lucky that they didn't become Money Guy's next victim, because if you become his next victim, you will die. Overall, Money Guy is a relatively easy being to avoid. You just better hope that he doesn't choose you as his next victim. Wanker Chief is a scary being that is rumoured to have existed for a few hundred years. Wanker Chief has sworn an oath to protect every single posh twat in the world, and if you hear a posh twat say the phrase Wanker Chief, then you need to run, because if you don't, he will get there and kill you. Wanker Chief is described as someone who has a black moustache, a top hat-like hat, and a black cane-like stick, with his small pistol that he carries with him at all times. What makes Wanker Chief scary is that if you see him, it is already too late. You will be his next victim. And what also makes him scary is that it's hard to distinguish whether a posh twat is saying handkerchief or Wankerchief, and some people get confused and wind up dying because Wankerchief got there and killed them. Posh twats normally use the phrase because they want to see poor people die because they're such posh twats. Despite Wankerchief being such a scary being, there are people who have claimed to have survived Wankerchief before, and here are some of their stories. The first story comes from a 29-year-old man in 1969. He was in England one day when in the distance he claimed he saw some kind of scary posh being. When he had a closer look, he realised it was Wankerchief, and when he saw there was Wankerchief, he ran so far and so fast that he never returned to that place again. The second story comes from a 27-year-old woman in 1968. She was in Scotland one day when, in the distance in one of the windows, she claimed she saw some kind of scary being with a moustache. When she got a closer look, she realised it was Wankerchief, and when she realised this, she ran so fast and so far that she never returned to that place again. Overall, Wankerchief is a relatively easy being to avoid. You just have to make sure that you don't go near any posh twats too much, as you may become his next victim. Buddy Budbud is a scary Indian being that is rumoured to have existed for 150 years. Buddy Budbud is feared across the globe. That is because if you smack or harm an Indian person, Buddy Budbud will come to you and kill you by smacking you to death with his big hands. Buddy Budbud is described as an overweight Indian being with a weird long brown beard and moustache. Buddy Budbud has sworn an oath to protect all Indian people from being smacked or harmed. And what makes Buddy Budbud scary is if you see him, it is already too late. You will be his next victim. There is no calling card from Indians either. Buddy Budbud just knows when they're getting smacked or harmed, and will come after you to smack you, preferably in the anus with his big, fat Indian hands. Buddy Budbud will continue to smack you until you die, and it is a long, slow, painful death, where all you will see is his big, fat Indian hands and his big, fat Indian face with his weird brown beard and moustache, and he may even squish you with his big, fat, overweight Indian body. Buddy Budbud is considered the world's best smacker, and that is why he is feared across the globe, because his smack is considered so powerful that you just simply die. Despite Buddy Budbud being such a scary, overweight Indian being, there are people who have claimed to have survived Buddy Budbud before, and here are some of their stories. The first story comes from a 29-year-old man in 2015. He was in India one day when, in the distance, he claimed he saw some kind of overweight Indian being, and when he saw this overweight Indian being, he was so frightened that he ran from that place and never returned to India again. The second story comes from a 28-year-old woman in 2016. She was in Pakistan one day when,
In the distance, she claimed she saw some kind of overweight Indian being with a weird beard and moustache. And when she saw this overweight Indian being, she was so scared that she ran from that place and never returned to Pakistan again. These people were really lucky that they didn't become his next victim. Overall, Buddy Budbud is a relatively easy being to avoid. All you need to do is to not smack or harm any Indian person. Otherwise, he will come to you and smack you until you die, and you will be his next victim. Willy Wonka and the Great Glass Elevator tells us of another little snuff film that Roald Dahl secretly created, but without telling anyone. Willy Wonka and the Great Glass Elevator supposedly takes place right after Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. You see Charlie go into the elevator, and then the elevator descends into what seems like darkness, and then the elevator slowly begins to fill up with a rare white milky substance, and you see a terrified look on Charlie's face. And as the elevator slowly fills up, you see a figure slowly emerge, and when you get a closer look at this figure, you realise it's Willy Wonka, and it's filling up because he's wanking over Charlie inside the elevator. And then, just before the elevator fills up to the very top, it fades to black. Many people thought that after the screen faded to black, that was the end. But after a little while, the screen would fade back in, and you would see Charlie's dead corpse after he had drowned in the rare white substance, and you would see Willy Wonka right next to him, whacking over his dead corpse, and you would see him looking directly into the camera with a sinister look in his face. Now, the video is rumoured to be cursed, and if you happen to watch it, Willy Wonka, will come after you and kill you in the same fashion that was done in the video, by drowning you in his rare white substance. He will then wank over your dead corpse and give a sinister look to the camera, and your corpse will be the corpse that will be seen by his next victim who dares watch the video. If you ever find this video, you need to destroy the video and never ever watch Willy Wonka and the Great Glass Elevator, because just like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, you may become his next victim. Girth God is a scary, infinite dimensional being that has existed for an infinite amount of time. Girth God is infinite in size, has always existed, and is everywhere at all times. What makes Girth God scary is that Girth God can create and destroy universes and multiverses at will with his infinite amount of girth. Girth God could literally make you disappear into thin air, and he could then alternate reality and wipe memories of all your friends and family, so it'd be as if you never existed. No one will ever know who you ever were. If Girth God chooses you as his next victim, then you will be his next victim. Girth God is feared across the entire universe, and that is because Girth God could make the entire universe disappear within a split second, just because he felt like it. Girth God employs girth men to spread out his girth across the entire universe. Girth Man
along with other girth men, get all of their girth from Girth God, as Girth God has an infinite amount of girth. Girth God has an evil side, which people like to call Girth Devil, and when his evil side comes out, it appears that there are two girthy beings in the same location, even though there's actually only one girthy being there. Girth God can control absolutely everything, including your own mind. Despite Girth God being such a powerful and girthy being, there are people who have claimed to have survived Girth God before, and here are some of their stories. The first story comes from a 29-year-old man in 1989. He was in Germany one day when, in the distance, he claimed he saw some kind of girthy being, and when he took a closer look, he realised it was Girth God, and when he realised this, he ran away as fast as he could, and he was lucky that Girth God chose not to kill him. The second story comes from a 27-year-old woman in 1985. She was in Italy one day when, in the distance, she claimed she saw two scary girthy beings, one of them looking good and one of them looking evil. When she took a closer look, she realised it was Girth God with his evil side, Girth Devil, and when she realised this, she ran away as fast as she could, and she was lucky, just like the man, that she didn't get killed by Girth God. Overall, Girth God is too powerful and girthy to avoid, and if he wants to get you, he will kill you with his girth, and you will be his next victim.
Wide men are a group of wide beings that have existed for a wide amount of time. Wide men are typically wide in stature. What makes wide men scary is if you happen to spot a wide man in the distance, he will kill you by stretching you until your face and body rips to shreds and you die. And after you die via the hands of a wide man, you become one of them. You become a wide man yourself, and you will permanently live with a face and body that's stretched wide, just like them. Wide men do not like to be stared at or laughed at, and if you happen to do either of the two, they will also kill you in the same fashion and turn you into one of them. Wide men, however, are feared across the globe because they also choose victims randomly, and you may be their next victim. Despite wide men being such a scary group of wide beings, there are people who have claimed to have survived wide men before, and here are some of their stories. The first story comes from a 28-year-old man in 1994. He was in the United States one day when, in the distance, he claimed he saw some kind of wide being which appeared to have a very wide face. Upon closer inspection, he realised that it was a wide man, and when he realised this, he ran away so fast and so far that he never returned to the United States again, and he was lucky that he didn't get killed by the wide man. The second story comes from a 26-year-old woman in 1993. She was in Canada one day when, in the distance, she claimed she saw some kind of wide being with a wide face. Upon seeing this wide being with a wide face, she ran away so fast and so far that she never returned to Canada again. This later turned out to be a wide man, and just like the man, she was lucky that the wide man didn't kill her. Overall, wide men are relatively easy beings to avoid. All you have to do is to hope that you don't spot one in the distance, because if you do, you may become their next victim. Oi Man is a terrifying being that has existed for an oi amount of time. Oi Man is feared across the globe, and that is because if you happen to spot Oi Man in the distance, he will yell Oi at you so loudly that you would simply die by vaporizing to death. And if his first Oi didn't kill you, then his other Ois will, because his Ois are considered so powerful that they simply just vaporize you to death. Oi Man is described as a large, white-like figure that always wears a black, hood-like coat at all times. What makes Oi Man terrifying is that if you hear an Oi in the distance, it is already too late. You will be his next victim. He will find you and kill you by oiing you to death with his powerful Ois. Despite Oi Man being such a terrifying and Oi being, there are people who have claimed to have survived Oi Man before, and here are some of their stories. The first story comes from a 16-year-old man in 2006. He was at an unknown location one day when, in the distance, he claimed he saw some kind of large white Oi-like figure. And when he saw this large white Oi-like figure, he was so terrified of it that he just ran away, never to return to that unknown location again. The figure he saw later turned out to be Oi Man, and he was lucky that he didn't get Oi'd to death. The second story comes from a 17-year-old woman in 2008. She was at an unknown location one day when, in the distance, she claimed she saw some kind of Oi type figure. And when she saw this Oi type figure, she decided to get a little closer to get a better look at this Oi type figure. And when she done this, the Oi type figure turned around and yelled Oi at her as loud as he could. And when she heard this, she was so frightened that she decided to run away as fast as she could and never return to the unknown location again. This also later turned out to be Oi Man, and she was lucky, just like the man, that his Oi didn't kill her. Overall, Oi Man is a relatively easy being to avoid. You just better hope that he doesn't choose you as his next victim, because if he does choose you as his next victim, then you will be his next victim. Banta Claus is a scary being that has existed for around 1,000 years. Banta Claus is feared across the world because, unlike Santa Claus, Banta Claus dishes out so much banter that you simply die. Banta Claus's banter is considered too evil and nasty for children and everyone else to handle. Banta Claus is described as looking like a more evil and brown version of Santa Claus. What makes Santa Claus scary is if you're not careful enough on Christmas Day, then he will kill Santa Claus, and then he will kill you and everyone you love as well with his evil banter. Santa Claus being such an evil and bantering being, there is someone who claimed they have survived Santa Claus before, and here is their story. There was a boy one day who was about 6 years old, and on Christmas Day at 1 in the morning he was thirsty, so he decided to go downstairs and get a glass of water. But as he was walking down the stairs, in the living room in the distance, he claimed he saw what looked like a more evil and brown version of Santa Claus. And when he saw this more evil and brown version of Santa Claus, he ran back upstairs and hid in his room for the rest of the night until sunrise. And when he went back downstairs to open his presents, he realised that his presents had been replaced with banter. Overall, Santa Claus is quite an easy being to avoid. All you need to do is to hope that it's Santa Claus that visits your house on Christmas Day and not Santa Claus. Big Tim is an absolutely terrifying, big and large mythical being that has existed for an unknown amount of time. Big Tim is feared across the world. That is because if you happen to spot him in the distance, then it is already too late. He will charge at you and kill you, and you will be his next victim. Big Tim has powers and a stature that resembles a mixture between Girth God and Sex God. Big Tim is extremely big and tall, so big and tall in fact that its true size has never been identified by scientists, no matter how hard they try. Big Tim also has an extremely large penis, which its size is also unknown because it's so huge. Big Tim is immune to almost anything, including nuclear missiles, because he is so huge. What is certain, however, is that Big Tim is not a god, and he is not immune to the power of Girth, which, as you know, is discharged from Girth God himself. Big Tim can kill you in many different ways, and I'm going to list them now. Big Tim can kill you by smashing your nan's back door in, and then by smashing your nan's back doors in. After he's finished with your nan, he will then come to you and do the exact same thing. Although you may think this is pleasurable, it is actually an extremely painful way to die. Big Tim can kill you by simply walking up to you and smacking your head clean off with his bare hand. Your head will eventually land somewhere near Big Tim, and he will do one of three things with it. Number 1. Big Tim may swallow your head whole in a weird fashion. Number 2. Big Tim may crush your head in his bare hands. And number 3. Big Tim may take your head home and store it as a trophy-like item. Big Tim can kill you by chest puffing you into oblivion. And if you don't know what that is, it's basically when you chest bump someone so hard that they simply die on the spot. Big Tim, however, takes this to the next level, with his chest bump being so hard that it simply obliterates you instantly. Big Tim can kill you by giving you a cheeky handshake of death. And if you don't know what that is, it's where you shake someone's hand and then shoulder bump them as hard as you can. Big Tim also takes this to the next level by shoulder bumping you so hard that you simply get thrown so far into space that you're now outside the multiverse, where you're never seen again. Big Tim can kill you by getting his huge dong out. Once he has his dong out, there's actually 2 ways that Big Tim can kill you by using his huge dong. Number 1 is by whacking you to death with it, and number 2 is by forcefully shoving it down your throat until you choke to death and literally explode due to extreme pressure. Big Tim can kill you by wanking his cock so hard that he spaffs out a huge spunkanami, which will kill anything in its path. A spunkanami is simply a more powerful tsunami created by Big Tim's essence of youth. Big Tim can kill you by smacking your ass on the cheeks and inside the anus until you die a painful death. This is considered one of the worst ways to be killed by Big Tim. Big Tim has also been known to shove inanimate objects through the anus as well. This isn't the same as Big Tim smashing your back doors in, as he usually doesn't have his willy out when killing his victims in this fashion. The final way that Big Tim can kill you is by simply standing up if you happen to spot him in the distance when he is sitting or lying down. When he stands up, it sends a shock of fear so great through your body that you simply just die instantly on the spot. He allegedly once stood up in front of a large crowd and they all died instantly on the spot. Some of them even vaporized completely. The reason that people simply die by him standing up is unknown, although scientists across the world believe it's got something to do with the fact that he's so big and tall. Big Tim sometimes will shit on it, where he will crouch down and shit out a huge brick of poo, which causes extreme amounts of damage. Despite Big Tim being such a scary big being, there are people that have claimed to have survived Big Tim before, and here are some of their stories. The first story comes from a 69-year-old man in 1969. He was in China one day doing some Chinese things when, in the distance, he claimed he saw some kind of big and tall being that appeared to have a larger bulge than usual. Upon closer inspection, he realised that it was Big Tim. Big Tim then notices the man, and upon noticing him, smacks a random person's head clean off, and then proceeds to give the man an alpha stare. The alpha stare scared the poor man so much that he ran away so far that he ran all the way out of China, never to return again. The second story comes from a 69-year-old woman in 1969. She was in England one day on some sort of Nandem bender when, in the distance, she claimed she saw some kind of big and tall being with a large bulge. From the bulge alone, she already knew that it was Big Tim. Big Tim then charges towards one of the Nandem members and smashes her back doors in. The 69-year-old woman can only watch in horror as she watches her friend scream as she gets pounded to death by Big Tim. Turns out he already smashed her dead nan's back door and back doors in the local cemetery before coming for her and smashing her back door and back doors in as well. The death of her friend scared the woman so much that she ran so far that she left England, never to return again. The third story comes from a 41-year-old man in 2012. He was in Germany one day plotting the next Reich when, in the distance, he claimed he saw some kind of large being. Upon seeing this being, the man already knew that it was Big Tim from his sheer size alone. Big Tim then proceeded to charge at the poor man, pounce on him, and then began to smack his ass on the cheeks and inside the anus. Big Tim then proceeded to forcefully shove a pen-like object through the poor man's anus, causing him to scream in pain and pass out. Thinking the man was dead, Big Tim got up and left the scene. The man eventually woke up, however, and was so traumatized by the experience
but he ran out of Germany, never to return again. The fourth story comes from a 21-year-old woman in 2017. She was in France one day doing some sort of fashion show with a bunch of her friends, when, in the distance, she claimed she saw some kind of tall being with a huge bulge. The sight of a bulge scared her so much that she and her friends began to run away. However, they were not quick enough for Big Tim, who proceeded to charge at one of the woman's friends and forcefully shove his cock down her throat. Eventually, the poor woman's friend's head exploded in a massive spunk explosion, killing her on the spot. The sight of her friend dying scared the woman so much that she decided to run away, so far that she left France, never to return again. The fifth story comes from a 20-year-old man in 1968. He was in Italy one day when, in the distance, he claimed he saw some kind of big being sitting in a large chair. The sight of a being in the large chair scared the man, so he kept his distance, which ultimately saved his life. The being then stood up, and once the being was standing, everyone in front of the man died instantly on the spot. After seeing everyone die in front of him, the man knew that the being was in fact Big Tim, and he knew he had to run away before he died as well, and so he did, all the way out of Italy in fact, never to return again. The sixth story comes from a 39-year-old woman in 2008. She was in New York one day looking out of a window when, in the distance, she claimed she saw some kind of massive being in the ocean. The being then proceeded to whip it out and wank into the ocean, causing a massive spunk army, which was so powerful that it utterly destroyed all of New York City. The woman somehow survived by swimming away from New York, never to return again. New York eventually repaired itself within a few business days. The seventh story comes from a 47-year-old man in 2007. He was in a conference meeting one day when, in the doorway, he claimed he saw some kind of big man, bigger than any big man he's ever seen before. The big man then walked into the room and gave the boss of the conference meeting a cheeky handshake. The cheeky handshake was so powerful that it sent the boss flying out the window and into space, never to be seen again. Upon seeing this, the man knew that the big man was in fact Big Tim, and upon realising this, ran out the room, never to return to that conference meeting again. Rumours are that the boss is still floating somewhere outside the multiverse to this day. The eighth story comes from a 33-year-old woman in 1367. She was in some sort of church when, at the back of the church, she claimed she saw some kind of large man, larger than any large man she's ever seen before. The large man then proceeded to walk up to the priest and chest bump him so hard that he was sent flying across the room, causing him to be killed and obliterated instantly. The sight of the priest dying scared everyone, including the woman, so much that they all ran out the church, never to return again. The ninth and final story comes from a 24-year-old non-binary gender fluid being in 2020. This is what they had to say. I was in some kind of house self-isolating myself from a C-19 virus going around at the moment, when, in the distance, I claimed I saw some kind of mythical being which was squatting down with its cock bollocks ass out. It then proceeded to shit on it by shitting out a huge brick of poo, which completely destroyed the house over there. After seeing this, I knew that it was Big Tim, and I knew I had to run away. So despite the warnings, I ran outside my house, never to return again. All these people were lucky that they got away from Big Tim and didn't become his next victim. Overall, Big Tim is a relatively easy being to avoid, as he doesn't usually go around killing people, as he usually can't be asked to due to his large size. However,
When he does decide to kill people, he will always succeed, as there is no way of getting away from him. And if he decides to choose you as his next victim, then you will be his next victim. Bossman is a scary being that was born in England around a couple hundred years ago. Bossman runs all the mafias across the globe and is feared across the world, even by the biggest mafia bosses. That is because any mafia boss that's tried to overtake him has been killed by Bossman. Bossman typically kills you with his trusty shotgun, but will kill you with whatever weapon he happens to be carrying at the time, and sometimes even kills his victims with his bare hands. Bossman is a little bit bigger and a lot more powerful than any other mafia boss. He does wear a boss type black hat and suit. Bossman even has a Spanish cousin called Bossmanarino, who is a little bit smaller but a lot more powerful than Bossman. Bossmanarino typically wears a gold-plated hat and suit similar to Bossman, except it's golden instead of black. This proves that Bossmanarino is indeed more powerful than Bossman. Despite Bossman being scarier and more powerful than your average mafia boss, there are people who have claimed to have survived Bossman before, and here are their stories. The first story comes from a 37-year-old man in 1839. He was in England one day when, in the distance, he claimed he saw some kind of boss figure in a black hat and suit. The figure looked larger and scarier than any other mafia boss he's ever seen before. Upon closer inspection, he realised that it was in fact Bossman, and upon realising that, he became so frightened that he ran for his life all the way out of England, never to return again. The second story comes from a 39-year-old woman in 1920. She was in Spain one day when, in the distance, she claimed she saw some kind of boss being in a golden hatted suit. Upon seeing the being, she initially thought that it was Bossman, but then realised that it was actually Bossmanarino, due to the fact that he was a little bit smaller. Upon realising this, the woman got even more scared than before. So scared in fact, that she ran all the way out of Spain, never to return again. Both of these people were extremely lucky that they didn't become his next victim. These days, Bossman doesn't go around killing as many people as he used to in the past. However, there is still the chance that he may choose you as his next victim. And if he does choose you as his next victim, then you will be his next victim. The Jolly Hog is a mythical creature which has legends that have been surrounding him for well over 60,000 years. However, the Jolly Hog himself may have been around for more than 160,000 years. Jolly Hog is responsible for every single battle and war victory on the face of the earth, and even in the universe since the dawn of time, and that includes battles in fiction such as Star Wars and Star Trek. Jolly Hog even fights battles against animals. For example, when ants go to war with each other, Jolly Hog decides which side wins. He may even be responsible for building Stonehenge and the Great Pyramids of Giza, because recently it was discovered that poo was mixed into the construction. Jolly Hog was known to shit out a lot of poo from his hairy anus after victorious battles. Throughout history, Jolly Hog would fight in various battles and emerge victorious in every single one of them. This is due to the fact that the Jolly Hog is immune to swords, projectiles, and even cannon fire. In fact, shooting a cannon at the Jolly Hog will simply cause it to bounce off its belly and obliterate everything in its path. This is why famous figures such as Napoleon and Julius Caesar would hire Jolly Hog
to fight in their battles with them. However, Jolly Hog only fights under one condition. Every soldier, officer and animal has to take an oath to Jolly Hog to never mention his name or speak of him again. This of course is accepted by those who hire him, as it means they can take all the glory of battle, even though Jolly Hog was the reason that they won. Winning a battle was, and still is, simply just a matter of time, whether that was during World War II, during a Star Trek or Call of Duty battle, or even during any type of warfare. Jolly Hog is always the deciding factor, and the winner is only determined by those who can get to him, hire him, and swear the oath to him first. Throughout history, it's been obvious who got to Jolly Hog first, as it's in the history books. In a sense, the Jolly Hog built the largest empire of all time, which is probably more than infinite in size if you include all realities and timelines, fiction or not, as he even helped the likes of Doctor Who win his battles. What Jolly Hog looks like is mostly unknown. In fact, the only description that still exists today is that the Jolly Hog has some sort of belly-like structure that cannons would bounce off of, and that he somewhat resembled a hog-pig version of a centaur. However, unlike a centaur, Jolly Hog can easily dismount from his horse if he so chooses. Jolly Hog typically rides off into battle on his trusty horse or vehicle, depending on what period of time he is in. But Jolly Hog also goes into battle on foot as well. Whether on foot or on his trusty horse, Jolly Hog will always come out victorious because of how powerful he is. Jolly Hog has unmatched battle tactics that even scare top tacticians across the world, even to this day. The horse is somewhat referred to as One due to how powerful and fast it truly is. Jolly Hog, in terms of power, is absolutely fucking powerful. Only Girth God and other mythical beings such as Big Tim can undermine him, which is actually the reason Jolly Hog makes everyone swear an oath that they'll never speak his name. That is because even the Jolly Hog himself is afraid of these mythical beings, which are so powerful that even I can't describe it. Mythical beings such as Boss Man, Henry's Senorita, the fence manager of 68, the dealer, and Buddy Bud Bud pose no real threat to Jolly Hog, as they're too busy doing their own things anyways. Other beings, however, such as Big Tim, Girth God, the Booter, Mr. Head, and Oi Man, all terrify Jolly Hog, simply because they're too powerful for Jolly Hog to defeat. That's why it's best that Jolly Hog remains unknown. In recent times, Jolly Hog has become even more unknown than usual. That is because other, more powerful mythical beings have been appearing more frequently, such as Oi Man. Jolly Hog keeps his oath because he is feared across the world. No one dares to cross his path or insult him in any way, just as he wouldn't dare cross paths with more powerful mythical beings, which keeps a cycle of power and fear which is still felt in the world today. Mr. Heinz is a German mythical being that has existed for a few hundred years. Mr. Heinz is feared across the world, not because of how powerful he is, but because of what he carries. Mr. Heinz always carries a Heinz tin of beans with him at all times, which is what makes him so feared. A Heinz tin of beans is considered to not only be a weapon of mass destruction, but also the most powerful weapon ever created, but sometimes even rivals Girth in terms of power. Mr. Heinz, however, has an infinite supply of these Heinz tins of beans, which is considered illegal actually, but no one dares try and take his Heinz beans away. It is also the reason that Mr. Heinz is still alive today, despite being a few hundred years old. That is because he's a mythical being, but also because he has his beans. Mr. Heinz also invented the formula which would eventually become
the Heinz tin of beans, which he named after himself. Mr. Heinz is more than just a businessman, however. He is a mythical being that's existed and caused havoc with his great weapons of mass destruction for centuries. Mr. Heinz is described as looking like a German mythical being with very thick eyebrows and a very thick moustache, which may be white, black or brown in colour, depending how aged he is feeling. In recent times, Mr. Heinz has laid low and decided to sell his Heinz tins of beans in supermarkets and shops across the world. The infinite supply of beans means he has and always will be making money selling his tins of beans. If you dare try and take his Heinz beans away, then he will kill you and you will be his next victim. Sex God is a sexy and scary infinite dimensional being that has existed for an infinite amount of time. Sex God is feared across the world, even in the universe and multiverse. That is because he has the exact same powers as Girth God. In fact, Sex God is sometimes considered to be a direct counterbalance to Girth God. Sex God is a little smaller and a little less powerful, but a lot sexier than Girth God. Sex God, in a way, can be described as an anti-hero due to the fact that he tends to do what he wants despite sharing similar powers and vows as Girth God. The reason that Sex God is scary is due to the fact that he can sexually attract any living organism and being at his will. He can even sexually attract other gods, even Girth God himself, which is one of the reasons that Sex God is so powerful, and is also the reason that he is feared across the world. Sex God can even sexually attract entire multiverses themselves, despite them technically not being alive. Sex God is simply just that powerful! The real question is, though, who is more powerful? Girth God or Sex God? Well, that question is unknown. Some say it's Girth God due to how powerful and girthy he is, while others say it's Sex God due to the fact that he can sexually attract anything he wants. There's also a small group of people who believe that they are actually equal in power, just that they are both powerful in their own way. At the end of the day, though, it really doesn't matter who is more powerful, Girth God or Sex God. Both of them can obliterate you instantly without a second thought, and no one and nothing can defeat them. Except maybe they can defeat each other. Unfortunately, no one will ever know the answer to that question, because both of them are mutually beneficial to each other. Girth God helps give Sex God his size and power through his girth, and in return, Sex God does sexual favours for Girth God. They are also commonly spotted together when they are doing their godly, infinite dimensional being things. So they won't decide to attack each other anytime soon. But if they do decide to attack each other, then you will be their next victim. That is because they sure as hell will take you, the entire multiverse, and everything else with them. So you best hope that they don't decide to attack each other anytime soon. Otherwise, you will be their next victim. The Caretaker is a scary and hairy being that has existed for around 60 years. The Caretaker is a being that likes to take care of people, physically and spiritually. This makes him feared across the world, because if he decides to take care of you, then he will become your daddy, and if he becomes your daddy, he may kill you if you do not meet his demands. The Caretaker loves taking care of people, and especially loves being a daddy to people, helping them out with life choices, and in return, they do sexual favours for the Caretaker. The Caretaker can answer any question in the world, and can help you with any struggle you may be going through. But you should be extremely careful when it comes to asking the Caretaker for help, because once he's helped you, then that's it. He's your daddy now, and there is nothing you can do about it. Once he becomes your daddy, you must do whatever he asks you to do, whether that may be work of some sort or a sexual favour. You must do what he says, because if you don't, then he will kill you, and you will be his next victim. Arseman is a terrifying being that has existed for around 69 billion years. Arseman is feared across the world. That is because if he catches you, then he will kill you by shoving you up his arse. You may even get sucked into his arse sometimes. Once Arseman has inhaled you up his arse, you will be trapped there until you eventually die. How long this takes can vary. Sometimes it takes just a few seconds as you get crushed by his sweaty arse cheeks smashing together. At other times, however, it may take years before you finally perish in agonizing pain as hairy, prickly poo slowly scrapes your skin off until you finally succumb to your injuries. This is considered to be the worst way to die of all time, even worse than having your balls squeezed in a hot elevator shaft, as Arseman's poo doesn't just scrape your skin, it also burns and melts your skin so much that some would rather have their soul be sent straight to hell than be trapped inside Arseman's arse! The longest time someone took to die after being trapped in Arseman's arse was 74 years. The victim was kept alive for this long because he kept eating and drinking Arseman's poo. This not only kept the victim well nourished, but also prevented his skin from being scraped or burnt off by the tough, wiry hair that is attached to Arseman's poo. The victim eventually succumbed to the smell, however. In some rare cases, Arseman will show you mercy by crushing you with his arse cheeks after a year or two of being trapped in there. Sometimes, when Arseman shoves you up his arse, he won't be able to fully shove you up there due to how fat and sweaty he is. This means as he rolls around and goes about his day, your legs will be snapped completely off, which when mixed with your skin being scraped and burnt off, the horrible smell, and being crushed by his sweaty and hairy arse cheeks, will simply kill you. This isn't even the worst part about the whole ordeal though. After you get killed by Arseman, your spirit will be forced to wander the universe for all eternity, where your face will be permanently contorted into an arse, scaring everyone away with that hideous face of yours and that horrible putrid smell, leaving you to be alone for all eternity. You will also no longer be able to have cock and ball torture ever again, no matter how much you enjoyed it when you were still alive, because who in their right mind would give CBT to an arse face? Even other beings will avoid you just because they hate Arseman so much. You will be forced to be an outcast, just like Arseman has, ever since he began his existence in this universe. Eventually, Arseman and the spirits of his previous victims will be your only friends, as they'll be the only beings that don't run away from you. You will be forced to become a part of the Arseman family, where the only people you can speak to are the spirits of his previous victims, and the only being you'll ever speak to again is Arseman! Arseman is described as looking like a big-ass house-sized being with a face that contorts itself into an arse! Arseman literally has an arse face! Arseman is considered to be an outcast amongst other beings and entities for this very reason. It is due to the fact that he keeps contorting his face into an arse, which really pisses off the other beings. Some even suggest that is actually the reason why Arseman kills people like you and me. It's because he wants you to suffer like he has his entire life of being all alone, because the other beings never wanted to play with him or even go near him, especially when it came to sexual situations. This makes Arseman even more terrifying in a way, because he's not killing you for pleasure. He's killing you because he actually wants you to suffer just like he has for so long. Arseman simply wants to kill you because he hates the fact that you're happier and are living a better life than he is, despite not even being a being. Arseman is also known to kill people simply to steal kills from other beings and entities. This only weakens his relationship with said beings and entities, making them hate him even more than they did before. Arseman is still an extremely powerful being after all, despite the fact that he is hated by pretty much everyone and everything, even if some people or beings don't have the guts or power to say it to his face. To put it simply, Arseman kills to spread fear wherever he goes, and the reason he shoves people up his arse, giving a lot of people a slow and painful death, is not because he enjoys watching people suffer. No. It is because he simply wants people to be with him, even if that means killing and making them suffer like he has for all these years. Arseman literally only wants to kill you so he can project his suffering onto you. Arseman, however, is an extremely lazy being, but doesn't gain any pleasure when it comes to shoving victims up his arse. However, if you somehow provoke him in any way, or just simply get in his way, then he will come after you, and he will kill you in the worst way imaginable, and you will be his next victim. Arseman also has cues that are often quite easy to spot. For example, before he attacks you, he most likely will let out a huge and disgusting fart to make room for you to go up his arse crack. You'll also be able to smell him from a mile away because he absolutely reeks. If you see, hear or smell him do this, then you better run away, because if you don't, then he will roll towards you and he will inhale you up his arse, and you will die an extremely painful death, and you will succumb to the smell eventually, no matter how powerful you think you are, and you will be his next victim. Arseman is also quite slow compared to other beings and entities anyways, but he is still much faster than you will ever be. so you better start running away the second you see Arsman start farting. Otherwise he will roll over to you and he will shove you up his arse, and you will be his next victim. The Cum Monster is a terrifying being that has been around for a very long time. The Cum Monster loves to cum, and he especially loves making other people cum by giving them cock and ball torture and other sex things. The Cum Monster is a mythical being that used to have a lot of influence and power and was feared across the world, primarily due to legends that were passed around about him. He used to give people cock and ball torture as punishment, along with other kinds of sexual torture. He usually dished out said punishment to anyone who wasn't wearing any socks, because that was a sign that they were extremely horny, and the Cum Monster liked that very much. The Cum Monster always enjoyed torturing people in sexual ways, because he thought that they didn't enjoy the torture that he was giving them. However, as time went on, people started enjoying the torture that was being given to them, which eventually led to the Cum Monster losing his power over time. People would purposely not wear any socks and break other rules just so they could receive some cock and ball torture from the Cum Monster. This of course would make the Cum Monster angry, as he thought that he was punishing these people, when in reality he was giving them a good time. The Cum Monster eventually became a joke amongst other beings such as Big Tim and Girth God, because no matter how hard he tried, the Cum Monster could never kill anyone except in rare circumstances where someone's testicles get squeezed off, killing them on the spot. Infections may also happen due to sharing tools with other victims. The Cum Monster is the only being that doesn't kill, at least not intentionally. That is because he would rather do sex things with his victims rather than kill them, like the average being or entity. The Cum Monster prefers to milk his victims rather than kill them. Other beings laugh at the Cum Monster for this very reason, as nobody actually fears him. The only reason people actually fear the Cum Monster is because he would write legends about himself to make himself seem scarier than he actually was, and it worked, at least until someone's first encounter with him. Once someone received CBT from the Cum Monster, they were no longer afraid of him. In fact, they wanted more cock and ball torture. It sometimes even got to a point where people would ask the Cum Monster for CBT, and even offer money to him in some cases, because they really wanted some CBT off of him. The Cum Monster hated it when people started calling him daddy or making ah noises. He was even more confused when people started asking for more. Hell, some even tried to give the Cum Monster himself some CBT. Eventually, the Cum Monster gave up and decided to cash in on his torturous and sexy methods. A bit like Mr. Hines did with his tins of beans. He decided to open up CBT clinics all over the world, where people can pay to receive cock and ball torture and other sexual things. As time went on, these clinics became more and more established, which brings us to today. These CBT clinics now offer top-of-the-range tools, shaving equipment, and even free cum storages to guzzle from. Don't let all of this fool you though. The Cum Monster is still a terrifying being who has milked and tortured many victims in the past. He's milked so many victims that his cum storage is now bigger than the size of Uranus, and it still gets bigger to this very day. The Cum Monster is also a powerful mythical being who has been around for so long that he simply can't die. However, Big Tim considers this to be pathetic. If the cum monster catches you misbehaving or without any socks on, then he will capture you and he will give you cock and bull torture. He will also give you CBT if you spot him when he is covered in cum. That is because the cum monster is hungry for your cum at the moment and wants you to fill his cum storage up. Before he gives you CBT though, he will first shave your balls and arse by forcefully pulling out one hair at a time using a pair of tweezers. He will then wash your balls and arse so that they are nice and smooth. He will then proceed to give you cock and ball torture. First by squeezing your balls with his hands. He will also insert one of his fingers up your anus to massage your prostate. After that, he will use tools such as a hot and spiky vice grip, which he will attach to your cock and balls, and a hot, long and spiky metal rod, which he will shove up your ass. After a very long time, cum will eventually start gooshing out of your cock and balls, and liquid poo will goosh out your arsehole. You will continue to cum until your cum storage is completely empty. The cum monster will then guzzle all of that cum, only for him to goosh it out of his arsehole and into his cum storage later on. If you are a woman, then he will simply give your tits a long and cheeky squeeze until milk comes gooshing out. He will also finger you and use tools on you until your V-sauce comes gooshing out, just like cum. Those mummy milkers will be milked. If you're a nan though, then you better watch out, as the cum monster will make you goosh out fanny powder from your vagina, and he will squeeze and suck your tits so hard that they will simply disintegrate. Sometimes the cum monster prefers a quickie, so he'll simply give you a quick finish, just so he can move on to his next victim. He does this so he can empty other people's cum storages and fill his own cum storage up quicker. At other times, the cum monster will even get helped by the likes of Big Tim or Mr. Head, because Big Tim is very good at coming from behind, and Mr. Head is good at, well, giving head. However, these occurrences are rare, because Big Tim doesn't particularly like the cum monster that much, and thinks he's a funny, pathetic being overall. As for Mr. Head, his head kills people in terrifying ways, which isn't what the cum monster likes, so the odds of Mr. Head and the cum monster working together are even less likely than the cum monster and Big Tim. Big Tim does help the cum monster sometimes, because the cum monster is very good at guzzling Big Tim's cum from his spunkin armies. So if you do see the cum monster and Big Tim working together, then that is most likely why. However, Big Tim will always go in for the kill, and there is nothing that the cum monster can do about it. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what the cum monster decides to do to you. If he decides to punish you, then you will be his next victim. Even if that means you won't die, it'll still be a torturous event where you'll cum more than you have ever before. There is always the small chance that you will die as well due to a cock and ball torture accident or an infection that was caused by sharing torture tools. So you better be careful out there and make sure that you always wear your socks. Then again, maybe you want to be his next victim, if that's what you're into. Doesn't matter whether you're into gooshing out huge loads or not though. If the cum monster wants to make you cum, then he's gonna make you cum so hard that you will become his next victim. Throughout history, there have been many accounts of people encountering the cum monster and being tortured and forced to cum for him. Here are some of their accounts, told from a written perspective. There was this one time where I was captured by the cum monster for not wearing any socks. He gave me cock and ball torture until cum gooshed out my cock and into his mouth in a disgusting manner. He then spat it into a huge cum storage looking vat. I could vaguely remember other victims that were in the room with me. One was dead because his testicles had exploded, and another had poo gooshing out of his arsehole, which gave the room a horrid and putrid smell. Another victim was a woman aged no older than 19, having her tits squeezed clean of all of that milk. The cum monster then gave me cock and ball torture and made me cum extremely hard. He then guzzled my cum down his throat, and I was then allowed to leave, so I did, and I never got captured by the cum monster again, though sometimes I do wish that he would capture me again, because I do miss coming for him. I was so afraid of the cum monster, that is until he captured me for the first time. It was a late afternoon in the year 1369 when I decided to leave the house without any socks on. Not even a minute later I could hear hefty breathing from behind me, so I turned around as quickly as I could, and I saw him. He stood so tall and towered over me and looked really angry. He quickly swept me off my feet and blindfolded me. The next thing I remember is waking up in a dimly lit hallway, being dragged by him. I was terrified as I didn't know where he was taking me. Eventually, after what seemed like forever, we entered a dimly lit room where I could see his other victims all tied up. He then proceeded to give me cock and ball torture. At first I hated how much it hurt me, but after he started fingering my arsehole, I began to enjoy the experience a whole lot more, until I eventually cummed. He then told me to leave without question, so I did. I ran away from wherever he put me. I never saw the cum monster again after that day. I do sometimes leave the house without wearing socks though, because I hope that one day I'll be able to receive cock and ball torture from him once again. I remember first hearing about the cum monster when I was a little girl. I was terrified at the thought of what he could do to me, so for most of my life I always wore socks. I never even took them off to have a bath or shower. That was until one day I forgot to wear them and left the house. As you can expect, the cum monster caught me and took me to his lair. He then squeezed my tits so hard I lactated milk all over the place. He then slurped up all of that milk and added it to his cum storage. I'm now no longer afraid of the cum monster. In fact, I hope he does squeeze my tits again, because I think it feels nice. I was walking down the street when all of a sudden I heard a noise from behind me. I turned around to see the cum monster standing there, covered in cum. I was terrified. I thought he was just a legend, a story used to scare kids into behaving themselves by being home on time, that sort of thing. But no, standing in front of me was the cum monster himself. He then pounced on me and everything blacked out. I then woke up in a dimly lit room, tied up and terrified. In the right corner of the room, I could see him. the cum monster slowly walked towards me until he was right in my face. He then started squeezing my balls as hard as he could until I passed out. The next thing I remember is waking up to him filling up a vat of some sort, which was filled with lots of cum. I decided to run away after seeing that, and I haven't seen him since. I remember this so vividly. It was a Friday afternoon. I was relaxing in a park somewhere, shoving a cactus up my ass! When, in the distance, I saw something strange. It appeared to be some sort of being covered in a weird white substance. I didn't think anything of it and went about my afternoon. Then as I was walking home, I could hear footsteps come from behind me. I turned around to see it again. This weird being covered in a weird white substance. He then rushed towards me and everything blacked out. The next thing I remember is waking up in a small, dark room. I was the only one there, or at least that's what I thought, until I could feel a sticky substance start dripping onto me. After tasting it, I realised that it was cum, but it was already too late. The cum monster then started shoving a sharp, spiky object up my arse, and started squeezing my testicles using a spiky vice of some kind. I later found out that he actually set my cactus on fire and was in fact shoving it deep into my poor anus, and there was nothing I could do about it. I eventually cummed and he let me go. I still occasionally catch glimpses of the cum monster from time to time to this day. However, I never got captured by him again. It was a cold December night, many years ago. The sky was littered with stars, as there were no clouds that night. I was drinking hot chocolate in the living room, watching TV, when I heard a terrifying scream come from outside. I put on my slippers and dressing gown and opened the back door to have a look. There was nothing there. I decided to turn the porch light on, and that's when I saw it. A terrifying, massive being covered in some sort of liquid. I really couldn't tell you what it was. I could only watch in horror as this being began to slowly walk towards me until it suddenly stopped in its tracks, looks to his left, and then darts off. I've never seen someone run that fast. I told my friends and family about the incident, and they all told me that it was the cum monster. And they also told me the legends that surrounded him. Some say I was lucky to have not been tortured by him, or others say I was unlucky as they themselves found the experience to be enjoyable. What terrifies me to this day though is what could have scared off such a terrifying being, and so quickly. That question still keeps me up at night sometimes. After that night, I never saw him again. I was fighting in the army when all of a sudden I get knocked out from behind. I wake up in a room that smells disgusting and is so dark that I can't see anything. I look around the room and that's when I see it. A huge, ugly being that seems to be covered in cum. He flicks on the light, revealing all of my mates, tied and gagged, and making horrible noises. This being then quickly approaches one of my mates and starts squeezing his testicles, causing him to scream so loud that his gag falls out. After a while, his testicles explode, killing the poor sod instantly. The being just stands there and starts sobbing, and that's when I realised that I had been captured by the cum monster, and he just killed someone right in front of me. My mate's death seemed to have bothered him, as he clearly wanted the experience to last longer. He then started to slowly approach me. The cum monster didn't know that I had untied myself and had a plan up my sleeve, however. He gets close to me and starts squeezing my testicles, and that's when I strike. I quickly get up and start to squeeze his testicles as hard as I can. This causes him to start coming all over me, which is exactly what I wanted. He is quick to get out of my grasp and quickly slurps up the cum that is now all over the floor, and that's when an absolutely huge being bursts into the room. He looks me dead in the eye and says, "I'm taking it from here," and grabs the cum monster from behind, whips out his penis and begins inserting it into the cum monster's anus. Jesus Christ, did this being have an extremely large penis. It was so huge that I couldn't even comprehend it. And then it dawned on me, it's Big Tim, and he's taking the cum monster from behind. After I realised this, Big Tim proceeds to thrust at lightning speed, causing the cum monster to moan and start calling Big Tim a daddy. Big Tim then told me to leave. I'd seen enough at this point, so I untied all of my mates and I legged it out of there and didn't dare look back. I dropped out the army after this experience, as I never wanted to experience that again. Only one other person made it out alive in the end. Everyone else got pounded to death by Big Tim. My last mate died recently due to an anal infection caused by one of the dirty tools that the cum monster shoved up his arse, meaning I'm now the only survivor left. So I decided to research him more and read other encounters people had with this being. It seems like I had a particularly bad experience, because it's rare that someone actually dies to the cum monster. But everyone but me in that room did die that day, and those screams one of my mates made as he died an agonising death while having his testicles squeezed still haunt me to this very day, and I haven't been able to get a good night's sleep since. All of these stories were from a long time ago. Whether they were telling the truth or not, we will unfortunately never know. However, what we do know is that the cum monster really is out there, and we do know that he wants your cum, and he will make you cum if you're not careful. Then again, maybe you want him to milk you dry. If that's the case, you should still be careful, as there's still the chance that you may die. Is that really a risk you're willing to take? Despite the cum monster being such a terrifying cum dumpster of a being, there are people who have claimed to have encountered the cum monster before, and here are some of their stories. The first story comes from a 39-year-old man in 1969. He was in China one day doing some Chinese things when, in the distance, he claimed he saw some kind of large being covered in cum. When he saw this large being, he knew that it was in fact the cum monster. He decided that he wasn't going to risk his life for sexual pleasure, so he decided to run away, all the way out of China in fact, never to return again. The second story comes from a 44-year-old woman in 2004. She was in England one day, on a hill of some kind, drinking a cheeky pint of Stella, when, in the distance, she claimed she saw some kind of large cum dumpster of a being. When she saw this cum dumpster of a being, she knew that it was in fact the cum monster. She decided to risk her life and get her tits squeezed by the cum monster until milk started gooshing out of her mummy milkers and poo gooshed out of her arsehole, and Vsauce gooshed out of her fanny. She loved the experience and lived to tell the tale. The third and final story comes from an 18-year-old man in 2011. He was in Uzbekistan one day, shaving his arse crack, when, in his bathroom window, he claimed he saw some kind of large cum-covered being. When he saw this cum-covered being, he knew that it was in fact the cum monster. His balls were already nice and smooth, so he smashed his own bathroom window and shoved his smooth and clean testicles into the being's mouth. The cum monster proceeded to bite the testicles, causing the man to cum huge amounts of cum directly into the cum monster's throat in agonizing pain. He then swallowed and gave the man a quick finish. The cum monster then left without saying a word. All of these people were lucky that they survived the cum monster and didn't become his next victim. Recently, people have claimed to have captured the cum monster on tape. This would be a first, as that would mean that the cum monster is the first being to ever be caught on tape. If that's the case, then it's most likely due to the fact that the cum monster never intentionally kills anyone, unlike other beings and entities. As you can see, the cum monster is clearly visible in all of these tapes. Whether these tapes are real or not, that is for you to decide. All I can say is, these people are extremely brave if they actually manage to capture the cum monster on tape. Overall, the cum monster is quite an easy being to avoid. That is, if you even want to avoid him, that is. But you should still be careful when you encounter the cum monster, because you may not be able to handle the agonizing amounts of cum that will goosh out of you if he decides to capture and torture you. There's always the risk of death as well, as you can never be sure if an accident or infection will happen or not. So, is that really a risk you want to take? Well, you may not even have the choice if you dare leave your home without wearing any socks, because as mentioned before, that's like an invite to the cum monster to do whatever he wants to you. There's also the risk of Big Tim pounding you to death from behind as well, because even though Big Tim doesn't like the cum monster, they still mutually benefit each other sometimes, because they both have a love for sex and cum. The cum monster just prefers to make people cum and guzzle, while Big Tim prefers to do the cumming himself. The only reason there's tension between these two at all is because Big Tim wants to take control of the situation. Big Tim doesn't come to fill any cum storage up. Big Tim comes to kill people, usually from a spunkin' army. This creates tension between the two, simply because Big Tim refuses to fill up the cum monster's cum storage. There is even the risk of dying an agonizing death to Mr. Head, because even though this is extremely rare, there's still a small chance that Mr. Head will appear when you're having your balls squeezed, and he will give you agonizing head until your penis falls off and you will die an agonizing death. Not only that, Mr. Head will eat your rotten corpse whole, meaning the cum monster won't even be able to fill his cum storage up, meaning he made you cum for nothing! You never have to worry about Big Tim and Mr. Head appearing at the same time though. Big Tim will simply want you for himself, so he'll likely get rid of Mr. Head so he can have you and the cum monster all to himself. So, you better be careful out there, otherwise things may not go as planned, and you will be their next victim. Willy Wonka and the White House tells us of a little snuff film that Roald Dahl never created, but without telling anyone. Willy Wonka and the White House was supposed to take place right after Willy Wonka and the Great Glass Elevator and Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, but was never made. Roald Dahl never managed to finish creating Willy Wonka and the White House. That is because he died before he could finish the production. As Willy Wonka and the White House was never finished, no one knows what is actually in the footage. According to legend, the footage shows Willy Wonka going up to the White House and wanking all over it. He then breaks down the White House door and kills everyone inside, including the President of the United States, who drowns in Willy Wonka's cum. The video then fades to black. After a while, the video will fade back in and you will see a video slowly emerge, and you will see the corpses of everyone in the world, including inside the White House, covered in cum. Inside the White House is also where you will see Willy Wonka wanking all over their dead corpses and looking directly into the camera with a sinister look on his face. The video then slowly zooms into Willy Wonka's face for the final time, and then it ends. Unlike Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory and Willy Wonka and the Great Glass Elevator, this snuff film was never finished nor released. All that remains of Willy Wonka and the White House is this still image. This image is also said to appear in the other two Willy Wonkas as well. Some say the footage is cursed, just like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory and Willy Wonka and the Great Glass Elevator, and if you happen to watch it, you will die just as if you would have watched the other two Willy Wonkas. He, Willy Wonka, will come after you and kill you in the same fashion that was done in the video, by drowning you in his cum. As the supposedly cursed lost tape was never finished, we will never know what would actually happen to you if you did wind up watching Willy Wonka and the White House. we can only assume that you'll die if you watch it, because that's what happens if you watch the other two Willy Wonka lost tapes. If you somehow find this video, then you need to destroy that footage and never ever watch Willy Wonka and the White House. Because just like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, and Willy Wonka and the Great Glass Elevator, you may become his next victim. His next victim!